Well, ladies and gentlemen, hello again. Welcome to another Reflected Reality Simulations video. My name is Graham. We're flying X-Plane 10.5 and the IXEG 737-300. This is version 1.0.7 of the sim. And we're flying from the French airport of Bastia on the island of Corsica over to the French mainland to land at Nice. Today we're going to be taking a look at the VNav capabilities of the aircraft as well as using LNav navigation. I see quite a few reports in the forums that the VNav capability on the 737 is not that good, to be honest, but that's not been my experience at all. It seems to do exactly what I expect it to do. I will say, however, that of the 40 or 50 hours I've spent in the 737 Procedures Trainer, not 1 minute of that was spent learning how to use the VNav functionality. The sim I was flying, the VNav capability wasn't available with that. That being said, from the research I've done on the internet and some of the other videos for the 737 model, we should be able to have a reasonable attempt at it. So the sim's paused at the moment. I'll just have a quick look through and make sure we've got everything set up as it should be. First things first, looking at the box, we've got the performance figures loaded. Zero fuel weight's 40 tonnes, so 46 is the gross weight. That's 6 tonnes of fuel. It's only a 40-minute flight, that's more than enough. Reserves are set and cruising at flight level 230. 230 is on the pressurization controller. We use flex thrust departure, so 55, coming back to climb 2. And the takeoff speeds we've got set already. V2 is 134. 134 is on here, and the bug is obviously set by that. We've got V2 plus 15 at 149 and V1 and rotate 121 and 123. Clean speed 210. We're not using the 5th bug today. So looking at the takeoff ref page 2, one of the things I see quite a bit in flight sim videos that makes simmers' lives a little bit more difficult than it should be is not using the correct takeoff technique, specifically the point where you choose to retract the flaps. Normally, there's 2 ways to do this. You can do the thrust reduction and acceleration at 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet, or you can do the thrust reduction at 1,500 feet and the acceleration at 3,000 above the field. 1,500 and 3,000, that's called the ICAO Takeoff Proc A. Critically though, we're not going to start accelerating or reducing the thrust, cleaning up the aircraft until we're above 1,000 feet. Today though, we're going to use 1,500 feet as the thrust reduction and 3,000 feet as the acceleration. We're going to climb out at V2 plus 15, following the flight directors. At 1,500 feet, the aircraft will bring the thrust back to N1. You'll see it enunciated up here. You'll see the thrust roll back. And then at 3,000 feet, I'll click VNav and it will start accelerating and cleaning up there. Everything else is set appropriately. We're not going to focus much on the navigation today. It's really just about flying the arrival, the departure on VNav and the arrival on VNav as far as possible. We'll have a chat about some of the issues faced on the way as well. So what I'll do is I'll take pause off, look down here, I'll take the parking brake off, advance the thrust levers, waiting for them to stabilise. There we go, and toga. There's 80 knots, first set. V1, rotate. Positive climb, gear up, follow the flight directors, and above 400 feet we can engage LNav. There we go, 400 feet, LNav. And above 1,000, I just centralise the flight directors. And there's Command A. Gone on to MCP speed, that's fine. 1,500 feet, it comes up to N1 and you see the thrust coming back. And there we go, climbing out at reduced thrust. You see the aircraft's got 220 knot restriction. That's because 225 is the flap 5 limit. It won't overspeed the flaps. But as we clean up, you'll see that come up to 225 and then 250. So notice we're still in the takeoff flap all the way up to 3,000. We maintained around 15 degrees pitch up. There we go, passing 3,000 feet. I'll click VNav. It drives the speed target up to 220. Above V2 plus 15, I'll select flaps 1. And once flap 1 is selected, you'll see the speed target come up to 225. There you go, 225. And now we're above 190, I select flap 0. And once we get to flap 0, the machine will target 250 knots. There we go. So flap 0, 250, auto brake off, landing gear up and off, and continuous ignition to off. It's 1,000 feet to go to the initial level off altitude. Aircraft's going up to 250 knots. Let's take a look outside. So you can see using the VNav procedure makes the takeoff a lot less involving. There's a lot less button pushing and knob turning to get the aircraft to accelerate on the departure. But also using Takeoff Proc A with a 1,500 feet thrust reduction and 3,000 feet acceleration makes everything a lot more relaxed. So if you see a lot of sim videos where people are doing things at very low level, very high speed, that's not how it happens in the real world. And we can make life a lot easier in the sim by just taking it a little bit, making it a little bit more relaxed by doing it that way. There you go, the aircraft's alt hold now at 5,000 feet. Regardless of VNav, it will never go beyond the altitude target we've got there. But hopefully by this point we'll be speaking to one of the departure radar controllers, hopefully cleared up to something like, I don't know, flight level 160. So there we go. Click VNav again with 160. It comes up to N1, VNav speed, and it will pitch up to maintain that speed. Climb to a flight level, make sure we've got 1013 set. Of course on my videos I use the QNH of 1013, so there's no real difference between flight levels and altitudes. That's just to keep things simple for the purposes of the video. In reality, you're cleared to a flight level by air traffic. That works as a trigger to set the standard pressure setting. And likewise, clear to an altitude, again it works as a trigger. Coming around, I'll set an appropriate heading as well. And we're going to fly back overhead the field and climb up onwards the cruising altitude. At this point it's interesting to note that on the Boeing and the Airbus the acceleration and thrust reduction is quite opposite to each other. On the Boeing it will do the thrust reduction by itself as it passes the assigned altitude, but to initialize or to start the acceleration you have to click the VNav button or dial a faster speed on the MCP. On the Airbus it's exactly the opposite. To do the thrust reduction you bring the thrust levers back from the toga or flex detent to the climb detent, but the acceleration happens automatically at the acceleration altitude. The aircraft will command a lower pitch attitude to allow the speed to increase. So passing through flight level 100, I expect to see the speed increase to 283. There we go, 283. I'll take the landing lights off, have a look at the pressurization. It's a sensible rate, sensible differential pressure, and it is pressurizing. And to make life simple, we'll work on the basis we've been cleared up to a cruising flight level of 230. And that's it, that's a VNav LNAV departure on the 737 Classic. I believe on the NG aircraft it's possible to arm LNAV on the ground, but not so on the Classic. We can do LNAV at 400 feet, autopilot 1000 and VNav at the acceleration altitude, or level change speed 210 at the acceleration altitude. And now we're routing on towards Nice. So let's take a look at the climb pages here. Obviously we've got legs on the FMC number 2. On the left hand side we're looking at the performance. It says top of climb is going to be at 18:21, that's 5 minutes from now, and descent at time 24. So we've only got 3 minutes in the cruise. What we'll do is we'll wait to get above flight level 200 and then we'll start setting the aircraft up for the arrival. We're going to arrive onto Nice runway 22 right using the VOR arrival. We're going to use LNav and monitor the VOR procedure using the first officer's instrument. So the first officer's got the VOR selected here, courses are the same 268, and the Azure beacon 109.65 is on both sides. I've done quite a few videos in the step-by-step series for the IXEG model, so if you want to learn more about the procedures for the lateral element, certainly have a look at some of those videos. This video is mostly about the VNav feature. It's been a couple of months since I last uploaded a flight sim video. The reason behind that is, well, we've just had summer in Europe. Summer for airline pilots is really quite busy. Flying upwards of 95 hours every month, that's a lot of driving to work and a lot of flying hours. What that means is recreational time is really at a premium over the summer, so time off is all about spending time with family and things around the house that you need to do. Flying virtual aircraft around is very much a secondary thing to do. But that being said, it's coming into the autumn now. Lovely colours in the trees starting to develop, and most importantly, a few more hours of recreation available. So with a little bit of luck, that'll hopefully translate into a few more flight sim videos as well. So through 200, and the seatbelt signs off. Okay, and let's have a look at the arrival. So first things first, we'll look at the FMC and the speeds that are coded. On the departure you saw how the VNav speed restriction worked for the various flap setting. We can use that to our advantage on the arrival as well. What we'll do is the Azure 15 point, where that's saying 224 knots and above 3,000 feet. I'll make that 150 and exactly 3,000 feet. Okay. Now what that means is the aircraft won't exactly fly 150 knots. In a clean config it will fly 210. If I select flap 1 it will come down to 190. Basically we're saying 150 is I want to fly as slowly as possible at that point, and we'll control the speed with the flaps. And 3,000 feet just to give us a level run in towards the approach. Otherwise the coding is quite straightforward. The final descent starts at 12 miles from the Azure, 3,000 feet, going down to the decision at 5.5 miles, 1,500. So there's 1,500 selected. It takes us all the way down to the runway as well. I need to look at the speeds as well. I'll do a flap 30 arrival. So VAP is going to be 128 plus 5, that makes 133. I'll use both. And AREF plus 15 is going to be 143. 210 remains. Landing on 22 right, I'm going to use flap 2. And just to check the landing elevation, it's set correctly. Let's have a look outside. See the lovely lines of the 737 model here. I see some comments on the forums that some desirable features might be opening doors and wing flex, but to be honest, I'm not so keen on that sort of stuff, to be honest. It's the best thing about the IXEG model is how it flies, how it responds to control inputs. It's virtually perfect in that respect. It does exactly what I expect it to do most of the time. The eye candy is a much lower priority for me. I've seen some models that the wing flex is ridiculously overdone. You get a nice wing flex on touchdown, but in turbulence it looks like a flapping bird. So I'd much rather have all that development time spent on how it flies. The IXEG model flies really quite nicely. So here we are at the cruise. Top of descent's coming up. What I'll do is I'll dial, as prompted here, reset MCP altitude. I'll dial it down to 3,000 feet now. Again, in reality we'd probably get a few step descents from air traffic, but we'll let the machine do it all by itself. What's interesting to note again is on the Boeing here we've pre-selected the altitude, so it will descend all by itself at top of descent. The Airbus, it will stay exactly where it is unless you push for descent or pull for open descent. Let's see if we can hear the Azure NDB as well. It's Alpha Zulu Romeo. There we go. So just approaching the top of descent, it will command retard. There we go. Brings the thrust levers back and starts the descent. And it goes back to arm. That just means the auto thrust is able to move the thrust levers forward again, should it be necessary. I would have a few comments asking me if I'd be prepared to do videos on things like the JAR design, Airbuses, that sort of thing. I do have the JAR A330, but it's quite a frustrating aircraft to fly. It's got a lot of simplifications on the flight management guidance system, and those simplifications, in my opinion, actually make it more difficult to operate than what the real aircraft is. It's quite frustrating that it doesn't behave how Airbus really designed it to behave, because there's been a lot of thought put into how the logic works on the aircraft to make it understandable by pilots. So the simplifications are good, they have their place, but unfortunately if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do at the basic level, then that's not a good thing to simplify. So passing through flight level 200 again, I'll set the seatbelt signs back on again. We'll check down here, we've got the bugs set, just verify I've done those correctly. So 127 plus 5, 132, that's fine. 127 plus 15, 137, 142 is on there, and 210. We've got auto brake selected, and it's going to be flap 30 arrival. We've tuned the radio aids, and we've got the courses selected. I'm quite keen to try out the FS Labs Airbus A320 now that that's been released for Flight Sim X. However, the problem with that is I've never been able to get FSX to run adequately on my system. X-Plane and the IXEG model run really nicely. X-Plane, Flight Sim 10, it doesn't run quite so well. That being said, it looks like a very detailed model of the Airbus. At the moment there isn't anything on X-Plane that really compares with that, unfortunately. But I've been flying the IXEG model almost exclusively in my spare time. It's a nice place to be, and it's a nice aircraft to operate. This part of the world is really nice to fly over in real life. Corsica looks beautiful, especially in winter with the low sun. And then onto the Riviera, you've got Genoa around to the east. Ahead of us, obviously, we've got Nice, then around as far as Marseille. It's a beautiful part of the countryside, especially in winter when you've got snow over the Alps. and usually lovely smooth flying conditions. Of course, on the other side of Italy as well, you've got the Adriatic down to Dubrovnik. It's another very beautiful part of the world. Some of the less pleasant trips you do are places like Tenerife and the Canaries, because that's a lot of time over water. There's not so much to look at really, and generally for short haul crew you fly down, you spend 40 minutes on the ground, 25 minutes on the ground, so you turn around and you fly home again. It'd be nice to spend a few more minutes on the ground. A nice night stop once in a while would be good. So we're still descending on VNav towards that 3,000 foot target. The next thing that's going to happen is if I look on the performance page, you'll see at the moment it's descending at 270 or so. When we get to flight level 100, 10,000 feet, it'll come back to 250 knots or 240. This is where the sim maybe has a little bit of an interesting approach to it. I don't know if it's a 737 issue or an IXEG thing, but as we approach 10,000 feet, what will happen is it'll go to FMC speeds to come back to 250, but not actually select 250, so it'll end up bringing the thrust up and then bring the thrust back again. It doesn't cause any issues, the aircraft still manages the descent quite happily, but it's maybe a little bit unusual. If you wanted to, you could use vertical speed between, let's say, 11,000 and 9,000, just to smooth that out. But it's not really an issue for me. I'm quite happy with how the aircraft flies, the approach. Landing on Nice. Nice is very interesting. It's set into the bay. You've got an ILS onto runway 04. However, during nice weather conditions, you normally fly one of the VOR or GPS approaches, so the aircraft remains out over the water to avoid causing a noise nuisance to some of the more expensive residences around the Nice Bay. Landing on runway 04, it's more or less a continuous descent and a shallow turn towards the runway. On 22, it's a much more significant turn, and also there's a level segment on the approach as well. However, that level segment for doing single pilot sim work, it actually really helps out. Judging the final turn on these circling procedures is always really quite difficult in the sim. We'll do the very best we can. So here it is approaching flight level at 100. I'll put this landing lights on just now, and then we'll watch how these modes work. So it's gone into FMC speed, but it's still showing 270 odd on there. So the thrust's coming up, and then what happens is it brings the speed target back to 240 and brings the thrust back off again. It'll fly level at 10,000 feet or so until it gets back on profile, and then it descends. Again, it's not as issues go, it's virtually nothing. You know, if the aircraft's not doing what you want it to do, then you can intervene, fly it in vertical speeds or fly it manually. But to be honest, it's doing a reasonably good job of managing the descent here. You can see it thinks it's 7 feet high, and the VDEV information here is nicely centralized. Going to maintain that 240 and then descend back on profile. There we go. Coming back, following a VNav path. This is the first time I've flown it with the modern instruments, the modern engine instruments as well. I don't know which I prefer, to be honest. There's all the hydraulic information's on here as well. I don't think it makes much difference, to be honest. So through flight level 100, just verify we've got the belts on and we've got the landing lights on. You can see the Azure 15 point out here. Starting to see the coastline appear as well. Should be a nice sunset arrival into Nice. So as I said, I've been almost exclusively flying the IXEG 737 in X-Plane for a while now. I've done a little bit with the 727 as well, but I'm quite tempted by the PMGG DC6 model. Maybe in another month or so, we'll see how we get on with that. If anybody's got any suggestions for other aircraft that are of a similar standard to the IXEG, or even of a similar design ethos, if you like, aircraft which focus on the systems, maybe not so much on the eye candy, I'd be very happy to hear them. There's other things like the leading edge Saab 340 or the Dreamfoil Banderanti. Let me know what you think. So looking at the navigation display, we can see the green energy line here says we'll be level just before the Azure 15. That's pretty good because we've still got, as far as the machine's concerned, we've got to lose just about 90 knots on the run in towards that. In actual fact, at the Azure 15, I'm going to be flaps 5. And this is where there's a little bit of a difference. My understanding of the 737 speed schedule was flaps 5 would be speed 180. The VNav system says flaps 5 speed 170. Now I know that the 737 speeds have changed over the years depending on the state of the rudder modifications they had. They had an issue with rudder hardovers causing a few incidents on the 737. So the speeds were changed to accommodate that. I don't know which mod this sim's designed to recreate. I've just been using the flaps 5 180 speeds profile. Obviously it varies based on the weights as well, but standard minimum clean is 210, and then you adapt that based on the weight you're at. And everything else is driven from that point. So I'm getting to the point where I'm going to need to select flaps as well. Make life simple, I'll turn the continuous ignition on just now. That's 1,000 feet to go. I see the coastline looking really quite beautiful in the sim. I'll put the view in such a position that we can see all the flight instruments as well as the mode control panel and the descent profiles on the box as well. So you should see the speed target come back to 210 at some point. FMC speeds. When it comes back to 210, there we go. When I get to about 220 knots, I'll select flaps 1. And now we're holding 3000, I'll also dial down to 1500, which is the minima for the approach. Just in. There's 220 knots, flaps 1. Once we get to flaps 1, you'll see the speed come back to 190. There we go. And as we approach 190 knots, within 10 knots of it, I'll select flaps 5. There you go. Flaps 5. And this is quite a laid-back approach to flying the arrival. We've brought the speed back nice and early. We've got the aircraft configured. We're going to go down the approach, gear down, flap 15, speed 150. making lots of extra time. These sort of approaches, you don't want to do them as fast as you possibly can. You want to do them safely and do them once. So by bringing the speed back early, it just gives us that little bit extra thinking time and a little bit more time to communicate with our colleague as well and make sure the aircraft's doing exactly what we want it to do. I've got 303 on the heading here. That's going to be the initial heading for the visual part of the procedure. So on the first officer's nav display, we can see the VOR radial coming in, and the aircraft will turn to follow on LNAV. 737 could follow the VOR if I wanted. The Airbus, you don't have that option. You can only fly a track or have it in managed nav. It can't follow a VOR by itself. So all the non-precision stuff on the Airbus is generally done as a GPS overlay. It's holding 170 with flap 5. The final descent is at the Azure 12. That's about 1.5 miles from now. So what I'll do is I'll put the gear down, select flaps 15, and once 15 selected, you'll see it come back to 150 knots. There you go, 150. What we can't do on the Classic is intervene with the speed. There's no speed intervention button, so I'll have to break it out of VNav at some point to complete the approach manually. The NG, you've got the speed intervention to do that. But 150, gear down, flat 15, speed brake armed. And we should be descending any moment. There you go. So passing the Azure 12, that would be the final approach fix. We'll check the altitudes, and in reality we'll be checking the various different altitudes all the way down the profile. For the purposes of the sim, I'm happy it's going to follow it correctly on VNav. So gear down, 3 greens, speed brakes armed, minimum's in the window. It's all looking quite good at the moment. Judging the final turn on in the sim is really quite hard, so it'll be a case of I'll do the very best that I can, but in real life it's a little bit easier. So following down all the way in VNav, the VDEV here is looking good, and speed target's 150. At 5.5 from the Azure, this 5.5 waypoint here, we're going to go into heading select and turn on to 303. We should be level by that point as well. So just 500 feet or so to go. The profile's looking really quite good. I'll transition into vertical speed, so I click VS, speed's 150, and it's showing MCP speed and VS now. That's perfect. So that's us finished with the VNav element, although we've still got good VDEV information here. It takes us all the way to the runway in theory. You notice the coding on the missed approach is not correct here. I think that's a database thing. You wouldn't ever fly that because that would take you into the high terrain. There you go, it's gone on to alt acquire. It will start the turn on the LNAV initially, but we get to 5.5, heading select, look at alt hold, I select 2000 for the missed approach. I'll start coming back to final approach speed. Somewhere around there. And we'll have a look out this side. I'll cheat a little bit. I'll turn that flight director off just now, so it's one less thing to do. Not really using that. Aircraft still flying on the autopilot just now. Passing this bay, I want to stay out over the water, avoiding flying over the land. It's all looking quite nice at the moment. I'll take the flight directors off, autopilot off, and auto thrust disarmed. We'll start the descent. And I want a view that I can see the runway as well. What I don't want to do is turn too soon. I want to basically hug the coastline around. Looking to land on the right-hand runway there, the more inland of the two. And it's quite a late final turn on at Nice, all the way down to 500 feet or so. Looking for the pappies as well, quite difficult to spot, especially when you're not on the extended centerline. Looks okay at the moment. On the left-hand runway I see 3 and 1. We're still descending towards it, and 3 whites on the runway that I'm intending to land on as well. So I'll keep the turn coming around now. We might overshoot just a little bit. There we go. Oh, 3 and 3. Let's see if we can get it back by 500. There we go. So like I said, we'll do the very best we can. Just watching that sink right now.
500.
There we go. 3 and 1, I'm happy to continue. Just watching the speed.
400.
This is where those sharp transitions on the pappies are really quite difficult. It'd be really good if the developers could make the pink phase of the pappies appear as well.
200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
There we go. Reverse. There's 80 knots. And manual braking. This looks like a convenient spot to vacate the runway at. Make sure the speed's nice and slow. We'll come to a point where we're off the runway. Bring the aircraft to a halt. Set the parking brake. So we'll stow the speed brake. Make sure the auto brake is selected off. Turn off the landing lights. Turn on the taxi and turn-offs. Start the APU. Turn off continuous ignition. Turn off the strobes. Make sure the pressurization is to ground. Make sure the flaps are coming up. And make sure the radar is turned off. And TCAS, you can turn it to off, leaving the transponder on. Okay, let's have a look on the outside, and we'll have a chat through what we did there. So first things first, leaving Bastia, we used LNav at 400 feet, putting the autopilot in at 1000 feet, maintaining that V2 plus 15 all the way to 3000 feet. At 3000 feet, we pushed the VNav button, and started the acceleration and cleanup. We cleaned up on schedule, with the VNav protecting us from flap over speeds that we never got anywhere close to. Once the departure was complete, we left it in VNav to transition through the flight level 100 restriction, accelerating up to final climb speed. We put a more restrictive arrival speed in the box than what we would have had had we left it to what was originally coded. That got us down to minimum clean speeds, allowing us to select flaps and slow down to 170 knots for the final turn on to the procedure. We then flew down the slope using VNav again, monitoring it on the radio nav and the distance, before turning the automatics off and turning in to fly a circling arrival into Nice. On the final turn in, I overshot the centerline ever so slightly. It's very difficult to judge that in the sim. In real life, as I said, it's a lot easier. And we very momentarily got 3 whites, becoming 4 whites on the Pappies before coming back to 3 and 1. That's not at all unusual in the sim. It's really quite a challenging approach to fly in reality as well. So in the sim, when you don't have the same visual cues, it's really quite difficult. But that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from it as well. I hope it's been informative. The VNav functionality, it seems to work quite well. The only time I've had any issues with it is when I've positioned the aircraft somewhere or not done a complete flight and maybe got airborne without anything loaded on the box to play around with it. I've then found it's a little bit less reliable. But for a full flight, it's never done anything but a perfect job for me, really. If you get any questions on using the VNav or anything else about the IXEG, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Again, thanks very much for listening to me, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thanks very much.